So that's a behavior change, right? Everyone's probably had that idea before, and we've all been, this really was the founding moment. It was the source of the idea, not how we started the company, I'll get into that. But everyone's had that experience, right? Everyone's been sitting in a restaurant, waiting way too long for a check and being like, damn, I really wish I didn't have to be here right now, and wouldn't it be nice if I could just go? And you can't, because we have, I don't know, people in the room somewhere between 20 and 50 years of ingrained experience of waiting for checks and handing over credit cards and waiting for servers to go to the machines and bringing back a receipt and signing the receipt. It sucks. And meanwhile, we all have all these crazy smartphones in our pockets, and Uber lets us get out of cars without paying the driver, and isn't that awesome? And it's this weird behavior change, because the first time you get out of an Uber, it's really uncomfortable, right? You're like, somebody's gonna yell at me because I haven't paid. And that's even more embarrassing in a restaurant which has like 300 people in it, and you're getting up and leaving, and a server chases you out, or a busboy chases you out. So we had to figure out how to fix that. And so that moment where I thought of that, like I said, everyone's had that, was holiday 2011. And the thing I was trying to figure out is if you're going to replace 35 years of behavior change, or ingrained behavior rather, it has to be so much better than the existing experience. How do you make it so much better? And that's not scanning a QR code, which was trendy at the time. And that's not like, hey, this is my password, or what's my table number, please just let me go. It's really just like, I should be able to get up and walk out, and then how do we make that work? And that idea just like, sat away in my head while I was at Angeles, and I was thinking, like, I want to quit my job and start a company. And my co-founder, Mark, was working at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and he was like, I want to get out of government. And we were talking about an entirely different business that had the same kind of behavior change problem. We wanted to change how credit cards worked under the hood. In order to do that, we had to create this different processing system underlying how your credit cards are underwritten. And there was no way we couldn't get the entire credit card world to trust these two dudes with weird hair to change how underwriting works in credit cards. And so we were depressed. And in May of 2012, I sent in this like really nondescript G-chat. It's like, hey, I want to bring Uber's payment experience to restaurants. And his response was epic. It was like, that's huge. And it's epic because Mark was regulating mobile payments for the government, trying to figure out why they weren't working in the US. And we proceeded to G-chat for the next 3 hours and had 3,000 lines of conversation, which we basically threw out the entire last 2 years of my life about how do we get people to use this. And the idea was that, well, you start where they want to go, right? So you can't build a mobile payments product and work at places where nobody wants to use it. That's why nobody's using the previous ones that actually I don't want to badmouth tonight. But it also has to be way better. So you have to train the staff really well, because anyone who's ever tried to team a Foursquare to like a special knows that it sucks when the server takes your phone away and runs over to a manager and say, hey, why isn't this working? Or what is this thing? I've never heard of it, and the customer swears that they're supposed to get something for free right now. And figuring out, okay, what are the other pieces? How do we make money off of this? And Mark's like, well, restaurants get screwed on credit card payments, and we can intermediate that. And so all these things bubbled up, and we had this crazy conversation that ended up with, hey, we're going to start at the top of the market, because it doesn't matter if you only eat at the restaurants once a month, you're going to have a great experience and you're going to remember it. And so that way, you're not going to get the crappy, hey, I went to the random place in my neighborhood and this thing was kind of cool, but the staff wasn't well trained and they didn't know what to do. And we figured out, well, if you have the customer's photo, they don't need to do the weird password exchange where they do some mystic incantation, tell the server, hey, this is the right table. And which I think there were some other interesting tidbits in there as well. But interestingly enough, we had this conversation and Mark was deeply ingrained in government. And we said, all right, this is cool. And 2 weeks later, he's like, another G-chat. He's like, so I think we should do this company. Here's like a name and here's a way to make money. And we said, great. He's like, I'm going to Japan, by the way, so we can't start this company. But if I come back in a month and it's still interesting, we should do it. And so I was going to ITB for their summer camp, and he was off in Japan, and I came back. Oh, he came back, and we met up. And he said, hey, let's still do this. And I was like, great, let's still do this. And so it turns out that that like 3,000 line G-chat conversation was the founding moment of the company, where we said, we think we can get people to just start walking out of restaurants comfortably because we have these sensors in their phones, and we can unwind the Stockholm syndrome that we all have after 30 years of credit cards. And now you can do this. You can go into 80 of the best restaurants in Manhattan right now, and in Brooklyn. Given that we're in Brooklyn, there's like 25 in Brooklyn, and that number is growing rapidly. And you can go in, you take your phone out when you get to the restaurant, you press one button, and you can tell your waiter, like, hey, we're gonna pay the card, and the waiter's gonna say, awesome. And then you just eat and get up and leave, and it works, and we're doing it all the time. So that's the founding story. I hope that was close to 5 minutes.
Amazing. Yeah. Questions.
Hey, are you noticing any changes in consumer behavior, that they're spending more money or less money, or?
You've got to be a plant. We are. So behavioral economics are really interesting. There was a very clear change with credit cards. Customers spend more with credit cards than they do with cash. Because they're not literally handing over money, they're not figuring out, like, hey, do I actually have enough money in my wallet to pay for this? It's not nefarious, but it turns out that if you're not getting a bill at the end of the meal, if you're not thinking about it, you optimize for your own enjoyment, right? So if at the end of the meal, you're like, I want coffee, or I want another drink, I'd say, or I want dessert, you order it because you can. And so we actually are seeing that. We're seeing that the restaurant's existing customers are spending more money when they're using Cover than they do when they're paying with credit cards in general. The other thing too is tips are like weirdly high. So the average tip in the system is close to 22%, which is awesome because it makes sense. The Cornell Hospitality School did a study that showed that tips drop the most in the last 15 minutes of the meal. So when you get rid of that 15 minutes, they don't drop. Part of it too, what we built in the system, we actually, like, this isn't a behavior change, we thought this was a behavior. We made the assumption that we think everyone tends to leave the same tip all the time. Like, everyone thinks that they're, like, really discerning and considerate about what happened in this meal and what I'm doing. Everyone leaves the same percentage every time, right? And with rare exceptions. And so we built that into the app where, like, everyone has a default tip. So at the end of the meal, you don't have to set your tip and press a button. You can just go and it'll leave whatever your default is. And so that's part of it too, because nobody's, like, rounding down at the end to make a whole number or something. And the other part of it too is when you set your tip and it's, like, not in the middle of the meal, everyone likes to think that they're super generous, right? So you're like, oh yeah, I'm, like, totally gonna leave 22% all the time because I'm a really generous person. And it turns out that at the end of the meal when they're like, actually I want to leave 20, they're like, but I want to be that generous person that I was when I set my default. So yeah, we see behavior changing across the board where people are enjoying themselves more because they're ordering more and they're getting the things that they want. And then they're treating the restaurant and the staff really well because of it. In part because they're having a great experience, and in part because the experience helps them do that. So definitely.
We don't.
Oh, is that it? Okay, cool, sweet. Find me after if you have other questions.